You're joking. Not another one?
Hello and welcome to Not Another HR podcast. It was the brainchild of two people who've probably got more enthusiasm than actually Gail to get things done. I'm currently with Rachel Rigg.
That's me.
That's you. And we, I would say friends. That's probably a stretch.
Tenuous acquaintances with a shared love of HR and employment law. Is that what we're going with?
I was going to say probably captured by HR and in a
held hostage.
Held hostage. It's like a Stockholm syndrome situation, really. Yeah. To be fair.
Yeah. Shared trauma.
Shared trauma. But I was going to say we've threatened for a long while to actually sit down and do some proper content around it. And I think one of the things that I was always kind of aware of is there's a lot of people doing HR podcasts. It's all very samey. There's generally two people with DJI mics.
Yeah.
In a content creating room.
Talking about their favourite law and how nice it is and how technical and things like that.
Really? Yeah. Employment lawyers love employment law.
Who would have thought?
It's not always been my experience, to be fair.
No.
So I think with everything that's coming in the next year, and also I think there's more space now for people to have conversations around about kind of HR and employment law and kind of how it works together. And probably people that we're probably very much on the same wavelength. So we're just going to we're going to try and get something out every few weeks-ish. Don't hate us if we don't do it. We're going to put it on YouTube, we'll put it on podcast, and it's really there as a guide. Polite reminder, this is opinion. This is not legal advice. But it's there really just to give you an idea of what's going on and kind of how to approach things and just kind of what's happening in the world at the minute. I feel like I've done all the talking. Anything that you want to...
I think in reality, we're just quite practically minded people. And so we're kind of nosy. I don't know if you know us, you know this already, but getting to understand how other people are dealing with these problems, what trends are in the market, how people are putting their heads together to find solutions to things that feel a bit overwhelming, is definitely what I'm more interested in. So yeah, taking this from an angle of, look, there's some technical aspects to this, but in reality, we're all just people trying to figure this out. And how are we doing that? But yeah.
Yes. No, I think I think there is a danger at the minute. I remember furlough when it first came in, and it's a bit where there's a tendency to fall into the trap of, I'm just going to follow the law exactly as it should be, which is not the wrong thing to do. But there is space to do things slightly differently and to be smart with it and to do that. I think the challenge at the minute is that no one can really say with any certainty where that is.
No, not at all.
Because the guidance, I've not seen any official ACAS code of practice come out on the news.
No, so it's things like the law for preventing sexual harassment comes in 6 months before the guidance on what steps you need to take to prevent harassment comes in.
Yes.
It's those sorts of things where, like furlough, it's changing every Friday at 3 p.m. That kind of feeling you'd get when you get a new announcement. You're like, oh God, what now?
Those halcyon days of announcements from the government.
All of that fun, remember? But yeah, so it's kind of, there's a bit of muddling through for now while we're waiting for things to drip feed in that tell us actually what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes, and I think there's the sensible approach to things, and there's doing it in a way which actually doesn't get you in the brown smelly stuff. Mm-hmm. But then it's the how do you do it in a way that actually you don't kind of feel knackered, but you're also not.
It's got to function, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's not about being like. I was going to say it's that balance about sort of caution and prevention, because you don't want to do something stupid, but you don't want to be. You still need to operate a business, and I think with some of the stuff that's coming out, and I got into a disagreement with a government body, or a government-funded body, should I say, recently about actually the changes themselves are all manageable, but it's the volume of changes.
Yeah, and when it's coming in and what that means practically. Yeah.
And it's a bit bananas in terms of it's kind of nothing's happening at once. It's all kind of here, there, everywhere. Which they kind of begrudgingly agreed with, but then completely disagreed with me as a consequence.
Who would have thought that would be the outcome of that? But
Yes, I'm shocked, honestly. Knock me down with a feather. So, I think, so should we get into the Employment Rights Act? So obviously, April is when when really it kind of kicks off and is all like rather exciting. And we will refer to notes because there is so much going on.
I mean, considering the list of things, I think the things we're seeing clients be most concerned about is particularly for businesses where your workforce is made up of people on sort of national minimum wage levels, so retail, pubs, etc. Changes to SSP and qualifying days, meaning that people are going to be more likely to be chancing the odd day off, cynically, if you want to look at it that way. But basically, those qualifying days that you wouldn't get SSP for will be removed, and the lower earnings limit is also removed on statutory sick pay. So managing absence is going to be huge.
But I would say, like, if we think about kind of the world that we operate in, like, so we did some work with a client recently, and they're going, oh my God, I've got loads of short-term absence. And my first question was like, do you do a return to work with people? And they were like, and there's...
What a good idea.
What's these return to works that you speak of? And I think that was but I think there's a whole piece in there in terms of, like, I completely agree in terms of it's a kick in the teeth.
Yeah.
But there is also the bit where, what the fuck are you doing to manage your own process as well? I was going to say, probably 5 minutes in the first swear. No, but what are you doing to manage your own process? Because there's a huge amount of people that will let things happen to them and then be like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. And it's but yeah, it's like that is going to be like, but the short-term absence people will be, I think with people who are like that, they are already the people that will be taking the WAS.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's not a kind of, because the other one is obviously like day one paternity rights and things like that, which again, I don't think...
Paternity rights, but not paternity pay. So, that's the interesting thing about it. It's like, okay, you can take your time off, great, but we're not going to give you any money for it.
No.
Outrageous. But no, so on the statutory sick pay point, I think there's two things. One of which is payroll being aware and managers being aware, right? So managers know what they need to do if someone is not coming in when they're supposed to be and they're getting a lot of repeat absence. And on the paternity pay, it's payroll really. They just need to make sure that, they understand that that's a new amount of time off that obviously people can elect to pay for, but they don't have to.
And I think, but it is a good time as well because you've got, to be fair to them, they're doing it at the right time because it's when the national minimum wage increases. So you just do it as a block action and something that's going through, sit down with your payroll team and go, okay guys, it's that time of year again. Yeah. She's got a bit more to do. Just on the national minimum wage increases as well. I was in a session with a large retailer who shall remain nameless, and when they said with the national minimum wage increases, that they had a big program for automation and use of AI in their warehouses, and the national minimum wage increases, and certainly kind of what it does for the under 21s, is now basically it didn't make sense 6 months ago. Now it makes absolute sense.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because all of this is supposed to be making a workforce more flexible and, making sure that people get paid enough and how this is going to boost our economy. And then you see the outcome of it, which is all those businesses that had to fold after national insurance contributions were hiked up last year overnight. And then you've got things like this where it's like your workforce becomes more expensive. And so you end up with redundancies.
But it's not just national insurance, it's the layering of issues. And I would, like, the ones that we've seen quite a few people reduce positions in the last 12 months and go, you know what, if we can keep it under 10 heads, fab, because actually we get the benefits of the national insurance at that point. And then also there's the bit, but it's the increase in costs that came during COVID. It's the salaries that increased in sort of the Great Resignation. Yeah, you've got utilities on top of that. Bear in mind we've got this now. We've got another war of fuel's going to go up again. So like just the price to produce things is going to go huge, mental. Yeah, and it's I think, and I do worry about kind of the landing of the obligation of some of these things, and again, the worst of it's not quite right. But I think like like the two biggies for me that are landing at the minute, which I think I think are going to catch people out, not horrifically, but it'll be in the long term, is going to be in around the sexual harassment as counted as whistleblowing, and also I think with the menopause stuff as well, where although you're encouraged to put menopause guidance in place, I think that if you run into an issue and you've not put something in place, the question will be,
it's going to be huge. Why
haven't you put something in place? So I think this optional tag on it isn't very optional. But
what is helpful is we actually got the guidance from the government on menopause action and what they're expecting. So there's at least some clarity coming in terms of expectations there, which is going to be huge, really.
But I although the guidance is there, I think some people, it's not the issue of menopause. It's the issue of yet another thing that we have to put a policy in place for. Yeah. And I think that with the volume of changes coming, that will be the great kind of, you can just get stuffed because you bunch of so-and-sos are just making me write more and more policies. Like no one likes speaking to me. But
it's also, policies aren't worth the paper they're written on unless they're lived and breathed by the business, right? You know, this isn't something that having a piece of paper doesn't get you out of unless you understand it, you use it, you rely on it, you see it in action. Yes, but
I think that with the menopause stuff, there's a lot of which is just being a thoroughly decent person. Yeah. And actually, if someone is struggling, and I feel like I'm mansplaining this, and I did sit on a I did tell you about the time I sat on a panel for about menopause in the workplace.
Natural candidate.
Oh, of course, you know what I mean? Who else but a man in his early 40s? Just to kind of go, ladies, this is I'm going to tell you about your lived experience.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, we're seeing a huge increase in things generally where, you know, people becoming aware of things like autism diagnosis, ADHD, etc. Menopause is very similar in terms of being able to have empathy and understand how that might impact whatever other process is going on or how you're managing someone. That obligation is getting more and more, and employers to start thinking proactively about and folding that in automatically.
Yeah, but I would say like with the way we kind of approach it is about the conversation about being super curious. Yeah. So if someone comes to you and goes like,
I'm really struggling.
Yeah, or I'm experiencing this, or if something's not right, so if they're like normally sort of like knocking at the park and then something changes, what are you actually doing to then support that person? Yeah. As well.
And I think from my perspective, it's not just when someone can tell you I'm struggling with this or I'm going through this, but being able to equip your workforce to spot that and to think about it with that curiosity to say, so-and-so's not been delivering in the same way. Is there something going on here? And exploring that first. And that's what the tribunals are basically telling us needs to happen now.
But I think that's the bit where most people are struggling because, and it comes back to a bit of the sort of the breakdown of like, because of the increase in cost, people are trying to do more and more and more with less. They're not, I think the remote working piece probably doesn't help as well, because actually that's not to sort of say, oh, everyone should get back in the office. But it's as long as people are doing what you need them to do and it's going out, most people are just like, yeah, fine. You know what I mean? They're not looking at kind of what facilitates that.
Absolutely. And, you know, this is the thing where it's like, you know, a business has objectives that are not just being really nice to their workforce. I'm not saying that businesses aren't nice to their workforce, but, you know, you're making something, you're selling something, you are trying to deliver things to customers at a certain level of quality or experience. I totally get that. But what all these changes in the law are doing and what the tribunal's expectations are is that basically the burden is on employers not to be dicks, like in such a way which is now making sure that you have that curiosity, that you have those policies, that a manager is basically equipped to understand the possible, you know, matrix of all sorts of things that might impact a person's ability to perform and think about those proactively.
But I feel like a lot of employees are feeling quite beaten up.
Absolutely. And the hardest thing as well is, you know, especially with the sexual harassment changes, you're basically asking employers to be psychic. and anticipate things that could arise in certain situations. But if something arises in a situation that you've not thought of, you're probably still going to be liable anyway.
You see, I think with the sexual harassment stuff, I think interesting is the wrong word, because it's not. It is and it isn't, and it's this bit where I think the reaction to certain instances has been quite eye-opening, quite revealing. Mm-hmm. Like we had one incident where someone had flagged an issue, and I was probably expecting a little bit more empathy. Yeah. From the females that led the business. Yeah. And it wasn't there. No. And I was like, oh crikey, that's that kind of was a bit like, oh wow. But I also think the fact that because it's going to be contained as a protected disclosure, I think people are focusing on the settlement agreements. I don't think people are focusing on that ability to make a claim, and that ability to succeed at a claim, I think, is infinitely better because of the fact it'd be classed as whistleblowing.
Yes and no. So the interesting thing about this is that realistically, whistleblowing is drafted as broadly as it is, in a way that sexual harassment probably could always have been part of it, because it shows a breach of the law. And people are kind of creatively using whistleblowing for things like failure to comply with data protection law as qualifying disclosures, etc. So the bar's been low in that respect, but what we get dovetailed into this protecting it as a specific protected disclosure. We also get the fact that you can't settle it in a way that means that someone can't talk about what happened in a settlement agreement, which I think is due to come in October. Yeah. So from there, what you have is a really unintended consequence where people just won't pay out as much to settle claims of sexual harassment, because the risk around it is not necessarily how much it's worth in tribunal, but how much it's worth from a PR perspective. And if you can't contain the PR perspective through a settlement agreement, then what's the incentive to pay out so much? But my experience is that
so we had a minor issue there. The recording equipment went off. So
and it's when we were making our best points, obviously.
Clearly. No. But the point we were making was in around that when you take what's going on with the sexual harassment, is few and far between. Luckily,
do you think?
From what we see,
yeah.
But I think when you get hold of it, you are you will probably.
We'll see a very different profile of. We see worst case scenarios, really.
Yes.
If it's landed on our desk, it's because everything has gone terribly.
And I think you've got the Lawrence Jones of this world, which are, again, you don't see it massively as an issue. I think there's a huge amount of people who feel far too confident to sort of with relationships in the workplace, and they will say stupid things, or think that I don't want to say misjudge the situation, because I think that's taking them off the hook. But they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. Yeah. But it's the bit where I think there's a lot of stuff where the stuff that we can deal with, we can sort of go, you were wrong to do that, and people will quickly realise that they were wrong to do it. Will thankfully apologise. Yeah. And you can draw a line on things with it. I think the bigger stuff where, and we are aware of a few employers who aren't brilliant, but I think that seems to aggregate under bad management rather than.
Yeah, I think we see kind of two sides of the coin with this sometimes, which is some are your very stereotypical things that we do want to prevent people from doing. No one is saying that people should be sexually harassed at work at all. So when there's any objections to this, it's always from the point of view of realistically how are employers supposed to tackle this in a way. And putting a sign up somewhere that tells someone, please don't sexually harass people. If you're someone who, is intent on sexually harassing someone, whether you think that's okay or not okay and understand what it is in the time, reading a sign on the walls is probably not going to stop you in your tracks of what you're doing. But we get flavours of either people who behave in a way that's not socially acceptable, full stop, and it is sexual harassment and it's bad. But then we also get really muddy waters of someone who is maybe from a different cultural background, So we had a case of someone who was describing themselves as very flamboyant as a result of their cultural heritage, which was Mexican.
Okay.
And saying that as a result, he's very tactile with people and, things like that. And so you get these really interesting grey areas where someone's been very offended by what someone's done, and the perpetrator is completely oblivious and has been treating everyone consistently and feels really mortified that could be sexual harassment. We're getting, I'd say it's either one of those at the minute.
That's interesting. I think I think there's still a lot to come out with sexual harassment.
So much, but I think we were talking to council about this the other day that came up to kind of talk about patterns they're seeing. They were saying they're seeing really horrific, high, sort of old-fashioned versions of sexual harassment. And I was telling them, like, the cases we get on our desk might be so much more, innocuous but misunderstood or grey in this kind of application.
I think the big one will be the third party when you got to catch third parties, because I think there's a lot of people that don't shit where they eat, for lack of a better phrase. And I had an epiphany with someone where they explained to me the amount of pictures of appendages that they receive on things like LinkedIn.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn?
Yeah. And
oh my God.
So generally some wrinkly old fella that sends his wrinkly fella.
I don't think I can drink this.
But yeah, and I'm like going, really? And they were like, yeah. And I was like going, and I was like, that doesn't happen to me. They went, yeah, precisely. I was like,
I'm sorry that you're not the target market in this situation, but
we can hope and dream.
Please feel free to send Alastair pictures of your appendages.
No, but because in my mind, I'm like going like, why on earth would you do that?
But this is what I mean. So when it comes to employers preventing things, these are people who, when we think about what this law is trying to address, these are people who are already defying societal norms about what's acceptable behaviour. Yeah,
that's a fair point.
And so how can an employer, you can have policies, you can have training, you can tell everyone once a day, one of my favourite clients used to say, would run training being like, is that somebody else's bottom? If so, don't touch it. And there's an extent where this is a huge obligation on employers to be psychic, to anticipate, to prevent, and you have to document it all in a way that's building your own case for the fact that these are things that are happening in your business in order to show what you then do to address it.
But I think that's what we're going to get to is that you've got to train train sort of everyone, everything. You've got to take it really seriously. So when the instance, encourage people to come forward, and then when the instances do come up, you've got to drop on it like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very, not public, but there's going to be very explicit kind of consequences for that as a consequence.
But then we are getting those layers where it is someone who is saying, well, I'm autistic and I don't understand social boundaries as well as the other person might have done or similar. And that's when it gets really knotty for us. How are you tackling zero tolerance to sexual harassment in your mind? What does zero tolerance mean?
But you see, that to your point, it's how do you can't walk around every day to people and go, don't touch people.
Or company announcements, keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah, a bit like Heidi High.
Yeah.
But for me, it's, at the minute, we're trying to keep it simple because certainly kind of business sizes, it's the making sure you're doing training when people come in. I think it's I hate saying it, but having a policy. I think you're encouraging people to raise the grievances, and if you get a grievance of that type, it's documenting it at a board level. The other bit is also kind of it's sending policy refreshers out. Yeah. And it's sending notes, not to sort of say.
Well, you've also, tribunals have been saying it's not one thing to send it out, you've got to document who's come back to it and completed it, and if there's gaps in it, and risk assessments. Huge.
Oh, yeah, but then that's one of the things that we've got as well, is that we've got people that run a lot with, go to venues, for example. So again, one of the things we're doing now is that we've done with a record label in London, that it's about venue and third-party safety. Yeah. So actually, if you're going away from, if you're in somewhere which is away from the workplace, and actually it's two birds with one stone. One is like a general health and safety to sort of say,
absolutely.
If something's going off, but if you're subject to unwarranted behaviour when you're on site, it's the what are you doing to make sure that you're flagging it so you can do something about it. again, the interesting bit is when the third party obligations kick in, and actually, what are you doing at that point about making sure that if you're aware that a specific venue or a specific business is just being harassing people, what are you doing?
But it's going to be even earlier than that. It will be your random people on the street. So it could be that I have to go to London for work and I stay in a hotel, and someone in that hotel, that's a risk area, where, client events where alcohol's involved, etc. How are you going to police it? So,
well, the other bit is nightlife venues. So how do you mitigate for people? So again, with if you take kind of venues, it's the you've got to deal with stuff as it happens. So if someone becomes sexually aggressive or harasses someone, your bouncers or kind of, you're going to remove the person from the venue. The issue will be is if someone's manning a bar by themselves and they're subject to harassment, what do you do in that situation? If as soon as there's no investigation, that person gets barred immediately and should be restricted from the venue. But I think what that means is that you've got to have you should always have a suitable person available at the venue. But
it goes beyond this as well. It will be things like, okay, taking that example of like a nightlife venue, your supplier who comes and drops off your stock once a week, if they start striking up a bit of an uncomfortable relationship with your staff. So it's not just the randoms out and about, it will be looking at your contact points of people in the network in any one role.
But to a degree, that's been happening for years. But I think this is where the law helps you in that situation, in that you can then turn around and go, actually, that's not acceptable.
I know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And so in the past, it was always a bit like, you know what I mean?
We're expecting it to flow down into contracts for supply and things like that, to be like, if we're engaging you as a business to do X, you need to uphold these standards.
But that's already there, though. So if you because they've always got the right to say, actually, we don't want someone on. Like certainly, kind of when I've worked in supply contracts, and we've had either people embedded or regular visiting sites.
But also that these people are being trained, that they're being, that there'll be almost like a contractual obligation for suppliers to deliver this training, etc.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're getting to sort of, to your point, that it's the gang master. It's almost like how the gang mastering stuff went on, or kind of the modern slavery. It's passing obligations back on to people, and I think there's going to be, because again, it's that if you've got someone who is a supplier to the business, they are harassing people, but they are critical to your business.
Yeah.
It's what punitive measures can you take against that particular person? Whereas I think realistically, the only place you're going to end up is actually saying, we're going to cancel the contract.
Yeah.
And actually for a business, they're going to be put in some hugely kind of ethical positions in that if you cut off that supplier, and that supplier is the only person that can do what you need, and that's coming from the senior level,
then how do you mitigate? But we're getting this as well with people who don't want people to look into their complaints of sexual harassment at the time. They fall out with the business later, and then they go, do you remember this that I told you about 2 years ago? What do you do about it? And that's I'd say 3 or 4 of my tribunal cases at the minute are like that.
But isn't the defence, there's not perfect defence, but isn't,
there's
to
no
that
perfect
point,
defence.
There is if you're suitably curious and you've offered to investigate and you do some form of investigation.
I think we're at a place now where we actually almost, if we become aware of anything, have an obligation to investigate and nail it down, even if the person who is subject to that alleged behaviour doesn't want that to happen.
Because the other point within that is anonymous and poison pen letters. Because again, it's in the past you could straight back that. Whereas in reality, what you're saying there is really that you've got to have some curiosity around that. There might not be someone to respond to. If
you get a thread of anything like that going on, and you don't do anything about it as an employer, you will probably be liable for it in tribunal at some point. And also, it doesn't matter how old it is, because the tribunal has such a broad discretion to say, for Equality Act claims in particular, if it's just and equitable to consider it at a time, then the judge can.
Sure, okay. But I think this is a good point, because we also want to talk about grievances as well.
Yeah.
And this is probably a good sort of segue to grievances, in that I think there's one we're seeing like a huge amount of very, very confrontational grievances at the minute, and it's been probably going on since probably back end of summer last year. I'm seeing a huge amount of people that are losing their minds over ChatGPT and AI.
Love it.
AI written,
Yeah.
AI written grievances, which I'm probably less angry about than certain people. But it is wild out there in terms of like the amount of grievances that are happening.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, I like your theory for this. Go on, what's your theory?
So my working theory is that so unemployment's at 5.3% at the minute, so there's clearly not enough jobs out there to go around. So my view is that people are not moving for a variety of reasons. And the people that would normally move because they're unhappy and they just find somewhere else and go are just sat there and being curmudgeonous, unhappy individuals. They're either putting grievances in themselves because they're really unhappy with the situation they're stuck in, or they're just winding other people up who are then getting unhappy with them. We then so this person would normally kind of jettison into the ether and everyone would go like, yes, they've gone.
It probably goes to your cost of living point about can people really afford to move at the minute, you know, and take that punt?
Because I think as well is that I think a few people are concerned about, I think we'll see a huge amount of short service dismissals back in the year. So I think people are smart enough, or certainly an amount of people are smart enough and savvy enough to realise that. So I think we've got this huge issue. I think people probably can't articulate some of the issues, which is why they're probably turning around to ChatGPT to go a really very short prompt and go, give me a massive...
And this is where we're getting more DSARs as well. They are, like, we've had clients who have never had subject access requests who have now had 3 in the last, 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, so this is something that it seems, I mean, you get them all in the exact same format. You really can see the AI influence here. But I think what's interesting for us is we can't just turn around and tell people, like, you can't use ChatGPT for this stuff. You need to be able to give people the chance to... You need to give people the chance to have the assistance in articulating things and not deny them use of a tool to do that.
No.
Provided that, you can then sit down with them and say, right, I've received this 50-page whinge. Thank you very much for that. What is going on?
But I think that's the answer to this situation, because people aren't very good at articulating, because they can't articulate what it is that they're trying to get to. You kind of almost got to say, brilliant, thank you very much for this.
Really helpful.
Brilliant, right, so you've set this all out. So obviously there is what's written down, and then there's a story that's in between the lines, and the subtext that goes on within this. And I think there's an opportunity that you have a conversation with people. And this is the bit that scares a lot of managers, having the conversation, because it's almost like, I don't want to fucking talk about it.
Like, if it's this big, I don't want to open it up anymore, but you'll, get to the crux.
Whereas actually, rather than facing away, it's facing into it. And I think that's the big difference with people. I think they've got to get their heads around that actually the value is facing into it. I think it's a pain in the arse, but I think you've got to take, again, it's not publicly, but people have got to see that they can't just bang a 50-page grievance in, and actually they're going to get everything, and it will work its way through the system. Yeah. But we've got to get from where we are to, it's just a fact.
And that's the thing, is that if you're working through the system and all of your grievances are so long, it's going to take you years to get through them, and your job isn't to just sit and investigate things all the time. So we've got 2 things we're changing in policies at the minute. One of which is, if you're using the assistance of AI to help you with your grievance, just please note we'll sit down and talk to you about it to try and get to the crux of it, and deal with it from there. And basically set out a roadmap for accepting that these things will be put into ChatGPT or similar, but that we will have to deal with it appropriately. And the other one is, you can't ever really have a complete long stop date on when you'll consider things, but people who have sat on things for years and years and years and then want you to go all the way back, you don't have witnesses, you don't have people who can speak to it, you don't have documents that relate to it, and being able to say, it's important that you bring complaints at the time of the complaint, and if you don't, it might affect our ability to reach an outcome on it for you.
But we've had something similar recently, and I've just sort of said to the person, like, they're citing stuff from 10 years ago. I'm not going, I've said realistically, so I can only deal with stuff in the last 6 months. And I said there is a question why now as well. So what's changed where you've gone all kind of...
And the trigger point is the thing that you really need to get into, right? Rather than, and you know, don't get me wrong, there will be cases where let's say someone's endured like 10 years of really horrific, sort of low scale but consistent sexual harassment or similar, and then there's a tipping point where it's become too much, and that is relevant, but you're not going to be able to make findings on the things that happen at the time.
But that's always the point of kind of, there's the joined instances. Yeah. So, I think this is the bit where, certainly kind of when I was earlier in my career, that we talked about more and probably we see less, but it's those instances which have a connection within it every 90 days, and you can see that campaign against someone.
Yeah.
I don't think people look for that in the same...
And that isn't really realistically the sort of cases that I'm getting at the minute. I'm getting one-offs which feel innocuous or misunderstood or similar, where it's then been blown up into this huge knot. And the knot tends to be that you're unhappy, the person who's bringing the complaint is unhappy being in the job for some reason, and then it's a floodgate opening of, and here's all these things I want you to look at.
No, and I think this isn't for today, but I think that's when we come into some of the substantial reason stuff that we've talked about before.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, but then it's how do you then deal with that? Because you're not dealing with specific instances of aggression or kind of damaging behaviour. It's the fact that you have a poor relationship with the business.
That's it.
And it's a bit where, could the business be a bit more empathetic? Yeah, generally speaking. Could you take a bit more responsibility for your own behaviour? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I also think people are scared to have that conversation back, to kind of go like, we can't solve the issues that you want us to solve.
Oh, absolutely.
And we can't make you happy.
No, but that's it. So look, I think the main tip is trying to cut through the bulk of things like that and get to the crux of the point.
Okay. So one last thing just to talk about. We won't talk about the Fair Work Agency. We'll talk about that next time.
We'll treat ourselves to that next time.
Honestly, it's French kiss. Is Reform's proposal to repeal the Equalities Act.
I was asked by a client maybe 3 weeks ago what Reform's policies were when it came to the Employment Rights Act, and I was sat there being like, I don't think there is anything. I don't think, if we got a Tory government in, you can almost admit that most of this is going to go away immediately. And then this came out and I was like, oh, that's a curveball.
But I think, right, so with the previous Conservative government, I think there was a really interesting thing where if you looked at the rhetoric that was coming out of central government, and then you looked at the policies that were coming out, the policies were much more family led. It was all about formalisation of 0-hour contracts. It's a lot of the stuff that we're seeing at the minute. Not going as far as the Employment Rights Act.
Yeah, this is that on crack.
Yeah. We will solve this issue for next time. So this is the Employment Rights Act. The Employment Rights is carrying on a lot of what has gone on already. My point within this, I think there is a danger of kind of believing rhetoric to be policy.
Yeah.
And I think there is a big issue in that we're a long way away from them being in government. I would hope.
I think some people are preparing their crisis plans already, and some people are just waiting to see how things go. But either way, realistically, I think what's really interesting for me is the Equality Act I have seen used by people who are potentially Reform voters. Because the Equality Act protects protected characteristics equally, right? It's designed to try and help support minorities, but in fact, it actually supports everyone, because everyone has a race, everyone has a sexuality, sexual orientation, etc. An age category. So the Equality Act applies to everyone, and I see it used by men to say, I'm being treated differently than a woman is because I've actually got childcare responsibilities in my family dynamic, and so I want to be part-time and I wasn't allowed. One of my cases I used to work on was a white woman claiming race discrimination after being called out for potentially racist behaviour towards her manager. And so it's interesting for me that Reform just wants to do away with protected characteristics and the Equality Act in a way that it's not being used
Yes, but I think there is always, it's like with the trans issue. Although kind of there was the public space issue, there is still an obligation to make sure that they are not subject to detriment.
Yeah, absolutely. It always has been.
Safe spaces. So even like in my mind, I'm going, yeah, you can do away with the Equality Act, but actually there is still an element of common decency within law. Yeah. And actually, if you're treating someone incorrectly,
it will just become constructive unfair dismissal claims.
Yeah. But it will still be there, but it will evolve into something else.
You'll give it a new label.
Yeah. And I think there was a guy, I can't remember, I think he's the chairman, and it was this bit where he was challenged on this, and he sort of said, yeah, but we'd still let people make claim, and it's just like, it's for me, it's a headline grabber. Absolutely. And it's
meaningless, really.
And I think that's the bit where I'm obviously, given my young looks, people will be shocked to realise I'm on the other side of things. But I think we've been here so many times where people have gone like, "Oh my God, it's going to be this." It's like you know what? Let's see what happens when we get there. Yeah. And I think the more interesting reaction is that if there is a change of government in 29 and say the Conservatives get themselves back in at that point, it's just how much of the reform policies that they reach for to get there as well. I think that's an interesting definitely question. But
either way, look, don't change your policies just yet.
No.
Continue with the DE&I initiatives, make sure that you're protecting people.
Yes.
But yeah, the idea of having to go through all of the change again, I'd rather just stick with what we've got.
Oh no, we've got so much more change coming, you know what I mean? We're going to be alive with change. So no. Right, we're going to call it a draw there. Yeah. So no, thank you very much for your time. We are going to try and get another one out in a couple of weeks, assuming that people that are probably terrible at getting organised get organised. So we'll drop this again sort of on podcasts. We'll drop on YouTube. Bear with us as we kind of go on our own journey of getting this out there as well. But thank you. You can contact me at EZHR, so it's info@ezhr.uk. And where can people get hold of you?
If you go to the Horsfield Menzies website, you'll be able to find my details.
And that's Rachel Rigg, by the way. Names do help.
Names do help.
They help. So yeah, we will. All the best. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time.